When it comes to the best point guards in the NBA, Jalen Brunson undoubtedly solidified himself as one of the top 5 players at that position. And for me personally, just looking at the Eastern Conference, the landscape of it, I think Brunson right now is the best point guard in the East. As compared to the entire NBA, he's 8th in scoring, shooting 41% from deep, and as his Knicks team is a top 4 seed in that conference. And Brunson these past 2 years has just demolished everyone's expectations. As in 2022, yes, he was a nice pickup, a good piece, but nobody, and I mean nobody, thought Brunson would be this good. And looking at one person who's obviously not a big Jalen Brunson fan, that is Candace Parker, a WNBA player. And Candace Parker, in the past few weeks, has just had awful take after awful take regarding Brunson.
We've seen Jalen Brunson in the playoffs with the Mavs, and he was number 2, number 3, came in, played minutes, supplemented Luka handling the ball. But as a number 1 option, last year in the playoffs, great first round, second round not so much. So I'm in agreement with her.
Now, addressing her first point about Brunson in Dallas. Yes, Brunson at times was the 3rd option and even 2nd option. But here's the thing. In the 2022 playoffs in the first round, the first 3 games versus Utah, Luka Doncic was not playing. And Brunson finally got the keys to the offense and showed what he could do. In those 3 games, 24 points in Game 1, 41 in Game 2, and then in Game 3 in Utah, scored 31 to give Dallas a 2-1 lead. Jalen Brunson in Games 2 and 3 saved Dallas' season. And without him, they don't make their way to the Western Conference Finals for the first time since 2011. And looking at Parker's most idiotic take, she said Brunson, quote, "Great first round, second round, not so much." Now, I want to call this a bad take, but it's really not even a bad take. It's a blatant lie that objectively is not true. As looking at Brunson versus the Heat, he elevated his game and was the best player in that series by far. And looking at his Knicks teammates, of course, Barrett had some games where he showed up, Randall, typical playoff Randall, and Tibbs had dementia. This series going 6 games was entirely because of Jalen Brunson. And here's the funny thing. Compare Brunson versus Jimmy Butler, the so-called Baby Jordan. JB in this series was 31, 6, and 5 on nearly 50, 40, 90 splits. He outplayed Butler thoroughly on the offensive end. And to go on a quick side tangent, playoff Jimmy Jordan, last year got kind of overrated. Now look, versus the Bucks, a great series, an all-timer. Average 38 points per game. But versus the Knicks, Celtics, especially Denver, he was highly erratic and inconsistent. So looking at Brunson versus Butler, with Brunson outplaying him, why is one guy labeled a playoff choker and the other guy Baby Jordan? Make it make sense. And speaking of Baby Jordan, I'm not going to call Brunson Jordan-esque, but versus the Heat in the 4th quarters, again, the only reason New York was competitive in this series, as in the 4th quarters, averaged 9.0 points per game, the highest in the series and the highest in the NBA for the second round. His shooting splits, 50% from the field, 33% from deep, and 90% from the free throw line. Looking at his second best teammate in the 4th quarter scoring, it was RJ Barrett at 2.8 points on sub 30% shooting. When talking about Brunson, his clutch gene, his takeover mentality, it's a rare thing few point guards have. And despite being barely 6'1", 6'2", this guy in the 4th quarters is unstoppable. And if the Knicks needed a big shot, they went to Brunson time and time again. And look, I'm no big Knicks fan, Brunson homer. But when it comes to Candace Parker's take about him, objectively, it's not true. And here's the odd thing. The cold hard facts aren't in her favor. And still, she doubled down on Brunson not being good in the second round. I don't know Candace Parker personally, but when you're this off on a take and still deny it, sidestep it, it's a classic case of someone who's never been told they're wrong. And of course, everyone has bad takes. I have bad takes, you have bad takes. But when you have a bad take, if you're proven wrong, take 2 steps back and own it. My problem with Parker right here is she avoids the argument she initially made about Brunson, which is totally wrong. And this tweet right here, saying Knicks fans are basically homers or attacking for no reason, it's a major deflection, ignoring the point she made in her initial argument. And looking at her second deflection from the initial point she made, now in this tweet, she's talking about small guards that don't win championships. And look, in a vacuum and isolation, this point is valid. Talking about CP3, Iverson, and how ball-dominant guards, who are smaller, don't really win championships. That's a fine point on its own. You can make that case any day of the week. But like that past tweet, this tweet right here diverts from the initial argument. And looking at Brunson this year in the regular season, of course, has elevated his play and taken another step forward as a superstar player. And when it comes to the Knicks team being much improved, getting OG, Alec Burks, Bogdanovich, this Knicks team has depth and great defensive wings. And I can virtually guarantee you, if they lose in the first round, second round, it's because of Tom Thibodeau and not Jalen Brunson. As looking at last year's playoffs, a worse version of Jalen Brunson averaged 27.8 points per game, just behind Kevin Durant and ahead of Tatum and Butler. There is zero doubt in my mind Brunson will show up big in the 2024 playoffs. And compared to the other Eastern Conference point guards, the elite guards in the NBA, like Dame, Trey, Halliburton, and Maxey, in terms of a complete season, I think Brunson right now is having the best season out of the bunch. As looking at Dame, not a typical Dame season. Of course, the second option, and the Bucks team overall is underachieving in the win column. Looking at Maxey, he's still a little bit inconsistent, and minus Joel Embiid as the number one option, going through a lot of growing pains, being the number one guy on his scouting report. Then of course Tyrese Halliburton, a great offensive point guard, basically 20-10 the entire year. But in terms of defense, one of the worst defensive point guards I've ever seen. And since the in-season tournament, his overall scoring has dropped by a whopping 9 points per game. And last but not least, you have Trae Young, who I'm also a big fan of, but Trae's overall game translated into winning, I'm not really a big fan of that per se. And compared to Brunson, not nearly as efficient. And look, Jalen Brunson isn't a perfect player, far from it. And defensively, yes, has some holes in his game. But if you're going to critique Brunson on his defensive lapses, defensive weaknesses, do that exact same thing for other point guards in the East. As looking at Trey, Halliburton, and especially Dame, defensively, much bigger liabilities than someone like Brunson. And in terms of being the best point guard in the East, the fact the Knicks are the 4 seed right now, when coming into the year, had basically zero expectations, is quite remarkable. Now, looking back at Candace Parker yet again, for someone to double down, triple down on an obvious take that wasn't true, is just kind of mind-blowing. So Candace, if you're watching this video, just own your bad take and admit Brunson had a very good second round outplaying Butler. Everyone knows your take was wrong, just come out and say it and own it. Not that hard. So, as always, thank you guys for watching, hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.